Hello, I'm Tom Kitch, and today is November 22nd, 2022. It's 59 years since President John Fitzgerald Kennedy was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. It was the biggest political crime in America in the 20th century, as was the assassination of President Lincoln on April 15 of 1865, the greatest political crime of the 19th century. Now, I have a great interest in American history, and I have a lot of books here next to me. I'll show you the titles. You can read them. I'm not going to tell you all my opinions, but you know the Warren Commission was the biggest crock of shit to ever come out of the federal government, where they blamed Lee Harvey Oswald as the lone assassin. Lee Harvey Oswald didn't shoot anybody. He was set up just to take the fall. He was involved, but he didn't shoot anybody. I think the fatal shot came from the front, from Charles Harrelson. And there was a shot from the back from Malcolm Wallace. And there may have been other shots from the front by Charles Lawrence or Charles Roberts or Arminio Diaz. It was a crossfire. It was set up, orchestrated by the Central Intelligence Agency, the attack dogs of the military-industrial complex. They wished to escalate the war in Vietnam. President Kennedy, who they viewed as being soft on communism, soft on Cuba. They didn't wish to attack Cuba. President Kennedy ignored his military advisors, General Lyman Lumsden, General Curtis LeMay, to attack Cuba in October of 1962. To do a preemptive attack on the Soviet Union, even though it would result in millions of Americans' deaths. Their attitude was, well, we'll kill more Russians, so we'll win. Lunacy. And President Kennedy ignored those people. But they killed him. President John Fitzgerald Kennedy is, in my opinion, the greatest president in my lifetime. I am so indebted to him. He saved my life. He saved the lives of all my family, my mother and father, my brother and sister, everybody. We lived in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It's very close to Washington, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, New York. It would have been nuked by Cuban nukes that were ready to launch. And Fidel Castro would have launched them rather than not use them. But there was no reason to do that. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, through backdoor communications, he could not trust his State Department. They were disloyal. Everybody in Kennedy's administration was disloyal, except for his brother Robert and also the Defense Secretary Robert McNamara. They were loyal to him. Through John Kennedy, through back channel negotiations with the Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, averted World War III. And I'm alive today, here, November 22nd, 2022, 59 years after the murder of that great president of the United States, John Kennedy. I say thank you, President Kennedy. Now I have on my bed next to me some books that I hope you'll want to read. Some books that I hope you'll want to read. Let me see if I can refocus my camera here. JFK and the Unspeakable by James W. Douglas. It tells the story about President Kennedy's back-channel negotiations with the Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, and also through communications with Pope John Paul XXIII to avert what would have been World War III in October of 1962. JFK, the CIA Vietnam, and the plot to assassinate John F. Kennedy. L. Fletcher Prouty, Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty, knew everybody involved in the CIA. He was a part of the CIA, the military liaison between the Defense Department and the CIA, but he was an honest guy, where those other people were all plotters. So please read that book, JFK, Vietnam, and the plot to assassinate John F. Kennedy. The one place that he misses the point is he blames it all on the CIA. But there was also complicity with the American mafia, particularly the Marcello organization from New Orleans, which controlled Dallas, Texas, and Texas billionaires that paid for it all. Oil billionaires from Texas who coordinated along with him. The beneficiary to the murder of him, his predecessor, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who would have been dropped from the ticket because of corruption scandals. John Kennedy was leaning towards Senator Smathers of Florida to be his vice presidential candidate in 1964. J. Edgar Hoover, the most corrupt person in American politics, evil person, evil, who was complicit, especially in the cover-up, along with his next-door neighbor, Lyndon Johnson, so that the truth would never be told about the murder of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. This is one of the first books to come out here. It's Crossfire by Jim Morris, an excellent book where they chart Lee Harvey Oswald, his life in New Orleans, and all this stuff, how they tried to set him up. How they set him up. They did set him up. They set him up. He never knew what his part was. His part was just to take the fall. He realized it, I think, right after President Kennedy was killed. He said, I'm just the patsy. And that's the truth. High treason. The Assassination of President Kennedy, What Really Happened, by Robert Groden and Harrison Edward Livingston. And I bought this particular thing from Robert Groden himself in Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas, when I visited there in 2009. Here's another book by L. Fletcher Prouty, The Secret Team, the CIA and its allies in control of the United States and the world. Brothers, The Hidden History of the Kennedy Years, by David Talbot. And he talks about the murder of Robert Kennedy as well. It's the same people. The CIA. They murdered them both. They murdered them both. Robert Kennedy thought he would become president, and then he could address the issues of who really killed his brother. But he got murdered first by the same people. Jesse Ventura, the former governor of Minnesota, American Conspiracies, the highest elected person in American politics, the governor of Minnesota, to be critical of the so-called Warren Report, an official version. He's the only one. Everyone else hides. No one wants to address that issue of really who killed the president. It's the greatest crime in American history in the 20th century, and it gets ignored. Murder in Dealey Plaza. What we know now that we didn't know